You thought the storm would end when the problem disappeared. You told yourself, when this is fixed, I will breathe again. When this door opens, I will finally feel peace. When this person returns, when this debt clears, when this result changes, then I will be okay. You connected your calm to a condition. You tied your peace to an outcome. So every day that the situation remained the same felt like another delay in your happiness. But something unexpected happened. The situation did not change, yet you did. Your heart stopped shaking even though the storm did not move. And that confused you. In the beginning, this hardship consumed you. It followed you into your sleep. It woke up before you did. It sat with you at work. It interrupted your conversations. It whispered worst case scenarios into your thoughts. You remember those nights. You would lie down, exhausted, but your mind refused to switch off. You replayed every detail, every word someone said, every decision you made. You analyzed what you could have done differently. You imagined 10 possible disasters before Fajr even came. Your chest felt tight. Not just emotionally, physically. You carried tension in your shoulders. Your breathing was shallow. Even small things irritated you because your nervous system was already overloaded. You kept checking your phone. You kept looking for updates. You kept refreshing things that had not changed. You told yourself you were being proactive, but in reality, you were panicking. You were trying to control what was never in your control. And the hardest part, you felt alone inside your own thoughts. Even when people were around you, they could not feel the weight pressing on your chest. They did not hear the silent conversations in your mind. They did not see how tired you were from thinking. You kept functioning, but inside you were drowning. Then slowly, not dramatically, something shifted. The situation did not disappear, but the intensity inside you began to soften. You noticed it first in small moments. You went to sleep one night and you actually slept. Not perfectly, but you slept. You made dua, and instead of crying from fear, you cried from surrender. You said, Ya Allah, I leave it to you. And this time, it was not just words. It was real. You stopped checking constantly. You stopped imagining every possible disaster. You still cared, but you were not consumed. You still wanted relief, but you were not desperate. That shift is not small. Do not underestimate it. Because most people think relief begins when the external problem disappears. But real relief begins when internal chaos settles. When Allah prepares to close a difficult chapter, He often calms your heart before He changes your circumstances. Why? Because if the circumstances change but your heart is still unstable, you will carry anxiety into your next season. If the money comes but fear remains, you will still feel insecure. If the relationship improves but distrust remains, you will still feel unsettled. If the opportunity opens but your heart is chaotic, you will sabotage it with doubt. So Allah works on the heart first. He stabilizes you before He stabilizes your situation. He strengthens you before He shifts your environment. He teaches you to breathe inside the storm so that when the storm leaves, you are not the same fragile version of yourself. You see, the real storm was never only outside. It was inside. It was the fear of losing control. It was the fear of uncertainty. It was the fear of not knowing what will happen next. And when those fears begin to loosen their grip on you, something powerful is happening. Tawakkul is being built. Trust is replacing panic. Acceptance is replacing obsession. You start to understand that you were never carrying this alone. You start to understand that Allah was in control even when you felt out of control. You begin to see that maybe, just maybe, the delay was not punishment. It was preparation. And once your heart begins to trust that, the anxiety loses its power. You are not numb. You are not careless. You still care deeply, but you are not shaken by every wave. You still feel the wind, but you are not blown away by it. This is growth. This is maturity of Iman. In the beginning of a hardship, you often react. You question. You resist. You demand answers. But as the lesson unfolds, you soften. You stop fighting reality. You stop arguing with what Allah has written. You begin to say, there is wisdom here even if I cannot see it yet. That sentence changes everything, because once you accept that there is wisdom, even hidden wisdom, your heart relaxes. You no longer feel like a victim of chaos. You feel like a student inside a lesson. And students who learn do not stay in the same class forever. Think about that. Allah does not keep you in a test without purpose. And He does not extend a lesson that has already been understood. If your heart is calmer now, it may mean that the internal objective of this hardship has been achieved. Maybe this season came to teach you patience and you learnt it. Maybe it came to teach you reliance on Allah instead of people, and you learnt it. Maybe it came to detach you from something you were holding too tightly, and you learnt it. Maybe it came to expose your weakness so you could build strength, and you learnt it. So the question is not only why hasn't the problem disappeared yet? The deeper question is, has the lesson already entered my heart? Because when the lesson enters the heart, the season begins to change. Your calmness is not random. It is not personality. It is not denial. It is evidence. Evidence that something inside you has aligned. And when your inside aligns with Allah's wisdom, your outside begins to follow. Do not rush it. Do not panic, because it is not instant. Remember, the calm came gradually. The healing came gradually. The trust grew gradually. So the transition may also unfold gradually, but it is unfolding. You can feel it. There is less noise inside you, less chaos, less fear. You no longer wake up with the same heaviness. You no longer speak about the situation with the same desperation. You no longer feel defined by it. That means it is losing its control over you. And when a test loses control over your heart, it is nearing its conclusion. Because the purpose of hardship is not to destroy you. It is to refine you. It is to detach you from illusions. It is to bring you closer to Allah in a way comfort never could. And once that closeness is built, once your heart finds stability in Him, the storm has done its work. You thought peace would come after the solution, but maybe the peace is the sign that the solution is already on its way. Maybe Allah wanted you to become the type of person who could handle what is coming next. Maybe this calm is preparation for elevation. Maybe this stability is preparation for responsibility. Maybe this trust is preparation for a door that requires a stronger heart. Because Allah does not elevate unstable hearts. He strengthens them first. So if you notice that your heart is no longer shaking the way it used to, if you notice that you can say Alhamdulillah even before the outcome changes, if you notice that your dua is filled with trust instead of panic, do not ignore that sign. It means something is completing. It means something is aligning. It means the chapter is turning even if you cannot yet see the next page. You thought the storm would end when the problem disappeared, but maybe the storm ended the moment your heart stopped trembling. And if the calm came first, what does that tell you about what Allah is preparing next? You kept asking Allah to remove the problem, but instead He removed your panic. That was not the answer you expected. You wanted the phone call. You wanted the money. You wanted the apology. You wanted the result to change. You wanted the visible solution. But Allah addressed something deeper first. In the beginning of your hardship, you were not just struggling with the situation, you were struggling with your fear of the situation. Your mind was running faster than reality. You were imagining outcomes that had not happened. You were preparing yourself emotionally for disasters that did not even exist yet. You were carrying tomorrow's weight today, and that weight was crushing you. You told yourself, I am just thinking. But it was not thinking, it was spiraling. You kept trying to calculate every possible ending. You kept analyzing every conversation. You kept asking people for advice, then doubting their advice. You kept checking for signs, clues, reassurance. And the more you tried to control it, the more unstable you felt. Because deep down, you knew something terrifying. You were not in control. And that realization is what truly scared you. Not the hardship itself, but the loss of control. Then something shifted. The problem did not disappear, but your obsession with controlling it started to fade. You noticed that you were no longer rehearsing every possible negative outcome in your head. You noticed that when the thought came, it did not stay as long. You noticed that you could sit quietly without feeling like you were suffocating. That is not weakness. That is tawakkul beginning to grow roots. Because tawakkul is not saying, I don't care. Tawakkul is saying, I care, but I trust Allah more than I trust my fear. In the early stage of hardship, your du'as were urgent and desperate. Ya Allah, fix this now. Ya Allah, I can't take this. Ya Allah, why is this happening? There is nothing wrong with crying to Allah, but there is a difference between crying in panic and crying in trust. Now your dua sounds different. Ya Allah, if this is good for me, keep it. If it is not, remove it. Ya Allah, give me strength. Ya Allah, guide me. Do you see the shift? You are no longer demanding a specific outcome. You are asking for what is best. That is spiritual maturity. When Allah removes your panic before removing your problem, He is teaching you something powerful. The problem was not your biggest enemy. Your fear was because fear distorts your judgment. Fear steals your sleep. Fear affects your worship. Fear makes you impatient. Fear makes you react emotionally. And Allah loves you too much to let fear dominate you permanently. So He allows the situation to remain while He trains your heart to stabilize inside it. Think about this carefully. If Allah had removed the problem immediately, would you have developed this level of reliance on Him? If the storm ended in one day, would you have learned to pray like this? Would you have learned to say, Hasbi Allah, with conviction? Would you have discovered how fragile your sense of control really was? Probably not. Sometimes the removal of panic is a greater gift than the removal of the problem, because panic blinds you, but calm allows you to see clearly. Now, instead of reacting emotionally, you think before you speak. Instead of obsessing, you reflect. Instead of begging people to fix things, you turn to Allah first. And that order matters. When Allah sees that your heart has stopped placing ultimate trust in creation and has started placing it in Him, that is elevation. He is teaching you that He is enough. Not your calculations, not your strategies, not your constant monitoring. Him. And here is something very deep. When panic leaves you, it means you have accepted that Allah's plan is wiser than your preferences. That acceptance does not come easily. It comes after tears, after confusion, after nights of overthinking. But once it settles inside you, it changes everything. You begin to move differently. You are no longer desperate. You are patient. And desperation and patience produce completely different futures. Desperation forces doors open prematurely. Patience waits for the right door. Desperation clings to what is leaving. Patience lets Allah remove what is harmful. Desperation speaks too quickly. Patience listens, and Allah elevates the patient. When your panic fades, it means you are no longer trying to outrun qadr. You are walking with it. You understand that what is written will reach you, and what is not written will never touch you. That realization is liberating. Because once you truly believe that nothing meant for you will miss you, your anxiety weakens. You stop fighting shadows. You stop exhausting yourself mentally. You begin to live again even while the test continues. And that is powerful. Because the hardship no longer defines your identity. It becomes a chapter, not your entire story. Allah sometimes keeps the test in place to see if your heart will stabilize before He shifts the circumstances. And when your heart stabilizes, that is success. Do not underestimate this stage. Many people remain in panic for years, even when their problems disappear. But your panic left before your problem did. That is a sign. It means something inside you has aligned with Allah's wisdom. It means your iman has strengthened. It means your heart has matured. And Allah does not train a heart like that without preparing something greater ahead. So ask yourself honestly, if panic is gone, what is the test still doing here? Maybe it is finishing its final details. Maybe it is aligning the right timing. Maybe Allah is arranging something you cannot see yet. But one thing is certain, you are not who you were at the beginning of this hardship. You are calmer, more grounded, more aware of Allah. And when fear leaves a believer's heart, it is usually because trust has taken its place. And when trust takes its place, relief is never far behind. You are not the same person who entered this trial. Pause and really think about that. The version of you before this hardship and the version of you now are not identical. Before this season began, life felt more predictable. Even if you had small stresses, you still felt a sense of control. You assumed certain things would always remain stable. Certain people would always stay. Certain plans would always unfold the way you imagined. Then the storm came, and it didn't just shake your circumstances. It shook your identity. At first, you resisted it. You told yourself, this isn't supposed to happen to me. You felt confused, maybe even offended by reality. You questioned your decisions, you questioned others, you questioned timing. But slowly, something deeper started happening. The hardship stripped you. It stripped your illusions. It stripped your dependency on people. It stripped the comfort you didn't even realize you were leaning on. You discovered how attached you were to outcomes. You discovered how much you relied on reassurance from others. You discovered how quickly your peace disappeared when control disappeared. That discovery hurt. But it was necessary, because growth rarely feels comfortable. In the early days of this trial, you were reacting emotionally. You were defensive, you were anxious, you were overwhelmed. You kept looking for someone to blame or something to fix. But now, you pause before reacting. You reflect before speaking. You pray before deciding. That change is not small. Before this hardship, maybe your salah was routine. Now it feels different. Before this hardship, dua was something you made casually. Now it feels urgent, personal, intimate. Before this hardship, you may have turned to people first. Now you turn to Allah first. Do you see what happened? The storm forced you into sujood in a way comfort never could. It introduced you to parts of yourself you had never examined. Your weaknesses, your insecurities, your pride, your fears. And instead of destroying you, it exposed what needed to be rebuilt. That is transformation. Storms do not come to destroy believers. They come to refine them. Gold is not purified without heat. Hearts are not strengthened without pressure. And Allah does not send pressure without purpose. You may not have noticed it gradually, but you are stronger now. Not loud strong, not arrogant strong, quiet strong. The kind of strength that doesn't panic at every uncertainty. The kind of strength that can sit with discomfort without collapsing. The kind of strength that says, even if I don't understand this, I trust Allah. That version of you did not exist before this trial. This hardship forced you to grow muscles you didn't know you needed. You learned patience not from reading about it, but from living it. You learned reliance not from lectures, but from desperation. You learned humility not from theory, but from vulnerability. And now, when you look back at the version of you who first entered the storm, you can see the difference. You were more fragile, more reactive, more dependent on reassurance. Now you are more aware, more grounded, more connected to Allah. And here is something powerful to understand. When a trial transforms you, it is nearing its completion, because Allah does not repeat the same lesson forever. If the purpose of this hardship was to detach you from unhealthy reliance, and you are now detached, then the objective has been achieved. If the purpose was to bring you closer to Him and you are now closer, then the mission is being fulfilled. If the purpose was to soften your heart and you are now softer, then the transformation has begun. Allah does not keep a believer in the same class after they have passed the exam. But here is the key question. Have you passed it? Not perfectly. No one passes perfectly. But have you grown? Have you become more conscious of Allah? Have you become more patient? Have you become less arrogant? Have you stopped blaming others for everything? Have you accepted that some things were never in your control? If the answer is yes, even partially, then understand something deeply comforting. The storm has already done its main work. And when the main work of a storm is complete, its presence becomes temporary. You are not in this season by accident. You are not being punished randomly. You are being shaped intentionally. The person you are becoming is not random. It is designed, and Allah designs carefully. Sometimes we think relief means the problem disappearing. But sometimes relief means becoming the type of person who is no longer shaken by the problem. And once you reach that level, circumstances begin to change naturally, because elevation requires preparation. Allah does not place new responsibilities on fragile hearts. He strengthens them first. So maybe this trial was not only about surviving, maybe it was about preparing you for something higher, something that requires more patience, more wisdom, more emotional stability, more trust. The old version of you could not carry that. This new version can. So if you look at yourself honestly and see growth, if you notice that you think differently now, if you notice that you respond differently now, if you notice that you pray differently now, then understand you are not stuck, you are evolving. And evolution means movement, and movement means this season is not permanent. The storm may still be visible, but the transformation inside you is the real sign. Because once you are no longer the same person who entered the trial, it means you are almost ready to exit it. The pain that once broke you is no longer breaking you. At the beginning of this season, it felt unbearable. It felt personal. It felt like something was being taken from you unfairly. You didn't just feel discomfort, you felt wounded. You questioned yourself. Was I not good enough? Did I make the wrong decision? Why would Allah allow this? You carried the weight everywhere. Even when you smiled, it felt forced. Even when you spoke, your mind was somewhere else. The pain followed you into quiet moments. It interrupted your focus. It changed your energy. People may not have seen it fully, but you felt it constantly. It felt like something inside you had cracked. But now, something is different. The pain is still there, but it does not control you the way it used to. You can speak about it without your voice shaking. You can think about it without collapsing. You can remember it without drowning in it. That is growth. In the beginning, pain feels like destruction. Later, it becomes instruction. At first, you only see what was lost. Later, you begin to see what was revealed. This hardship exposed things you would have never noticed in comfort. It showed you who truly stands by you. It showed you who disappears when things are not convenient. It showed you what you were overly attached to. It showed you how fragile certain foundations were. And that exposure hurt. Because illusions feel safe until they break. You thought certain relationships were permanent. You thought certain plans were guaranteed. You thought certain doors would always remain open. Then Allah allowed them to close. Not to punish you, but to protect you from building your future on unstable ground. Pain is often protection in disguise. But you do not see that in the beginning. In the beginning, you only see loss. You only see disappointment. You only see what did not go the way you planned. But over time, perspective begins to replace emotion. You start to realize if that door had stayed open, it might have led you somewhere harmful. If that person had remained close, they might have distracted you from your growth. If that plan had succeeded, it might have taken you away from something better. You begin to understand that Allah's wisdom operates beyond your immediate feelings. And that realization changes everything. Because once pain turns into perspective, it loses its ability to dominate you. It becomes a lesson, not a life sentence. At first you were asking, why is this happening to me? Now you are asking, what is this teaching me? That shift is powerful because victims ask why. Students ask what. When you move from why me to what now, you step into strength. You stop being defined by what happened. You start being shaped by what you learned. And you have learned a lot. You learned that not everyone who smiles at you is sincere. You learned that your value is not determined by someone's decision to stay or leave. You learned that your plans are not ultimate, Allah's plans are. You learned that attachment without balance leads to suffering. You learned that relying on Allah is not optional, it is essential. Those lessons came through pain, but now that you have absorbed them, the pain does not have the same power over you. You are no longer reacting emotionally to every reminder of what happened. You are responding with understanding. You are calmer, wiser, more aware. And here is something important. When pain begins to teach instead of wound, it means its purpose is being fulfilled. Allah does not send pain without purpose, and He does not let it linger beyond its wisdom. The early stage of hardship feels like chaos. The later stage feels like clarity. You begin to see patterns. You begin to see signs you missed before. You begin to recognize how certain events aligned in ways you could not see at the time. You realize that what felt like a disaster may have been divine redirection. You realize that what felt like rejection may have been protection. You realize that what felt like delay may have been preparation. And when you reach that stage, when you can say Alhamdulillah, not only for what you gained, but also for what you lost, that is transformation. That is elevation. The pain did not disappear overnight, but it changed form. It no longer feels like something crushing your chest. It feels like something that shaped your spine. It made you stand differently, think differently, choose differently. You are more cautious now, more intentional, more grounded. You no longer chase what once distracted you. You no longer ignore red flags you once tolerated. You no longer compromise your peace the way you once did. That is not bitterness, that is growth. Pain refined your standards. Pain clarified your priorities. Pain exposed your weaknesses and forced you to strengthen them. And once pain turns into clarity, it cannot dominate you anymore. Because clarity is light, and light removes darkness. So if you can now look back at the beginning of this hardship and see how much you have learned, if you can acknowledge that you are wiser now than you were before, if you can admit that some doors needed to close, then understand something powerful. This season is not here to destroy you. It is here to graduate you. And graduation happens when the lesson is understood. You are no longer asking, why did this happen? You are beginning to say, I see why this happened. And that sentence is the beginning of closure. Because once you see the wisdom, the wound no longer bleeds. It becomes a scar. And scars are proof that you healed, not that you were weak. If the pain is no longer breaking you, if it is now building you, then the chapter is shifting. And Allah does not leave His servants in a storm after they have extracted its wisdom. The pain has changed, which means the season is changing too. You stopped begging people and started relying on Allah. At the beginning of this hardship, you were searching for relief in people. You wanted someone to explain it, someone to fix it, someone to reassure you. You replayed conversations in your mind, wondering what you could say differently. You drafted messages and deleted them. You waited for replies that never came. You hoped someone would step in and carry part of the weight for you. And when they didn't, it hurt even more. Not just because of the original problem, but because the support you expected did not arrive the way you imagined. That disappointment was heavy. You realize something uncomfortable. People are limited. No matter how much they care, they cannot control outcomes. They cannot rewrite qadr. They cannot guarantee your peace. They cannot fill every emotional gap inside you. At first, that realization felt lonely. You felt like you were standing alone in your storm. But slowly, something deeper happened. You began turning to Allah first, not as a last resort, not after exhausting every human option. But first, before sending the message, you made dua. Before making the decision, you prayed istikhara. Before reacting emotionally, you paused and said, Ya Allah, guide me. That shift is not small. Before this hardship, maybe you depended on people more than you realized. Their validation made you feel secure. Their presence made you feel stable. Their approval influenced your choices. Now, you still value people, but you no longer build your emotional survival on them. That is strength. Because when you depend too heavily on creation, your peace becomes fragile. People change, people leave, people disappoint, but Allah does not. And this hardship forced you to confront that truth. You discovered that when people could not answer your late night thoughts, Allah could. When people misunderstood you, Allah knew your intention. When people were silent, Allah was listening. When people walked away, Allah remained. At first, you turned to Him out of desperation. Now you turn to Him out of trust. That is maturity. Your sujood feels different now. It is not rushed. It is not routine. It is real. You sit longer. You speak honestly. You admit your fears. You admit your weaknesses. You admit your mistakes. You stop pretending to be strong in front of Allah. And that vulnerability created a connection you did not have before. Hardship has a way of purifying reliance. It exposes where your heart was leaning too heavily. Maybe you leaned too heavily on a person. Maybe you leaned too heavily on a plan. Maybe you leaned too heavily on stability. And when those supports were shaken, you felt like you were falling. But you were not falling. You were being redirected from fragile support to permanent support. From limited hands to the owner of all hands. From unstable foundations to the one who never changes. And once your heart begins to anchor itself in Allah, something powerful happens. You are no longer desperate for people to behave a certain way. You are no longer shattered when someone misunderstands you. You are no longer crushed when someone leaves, because your core stability does not depend on them anymore. You still feel emotion, you still care, but you are not dependent. And that detachment is not coldness. It is clarity. You now understand that people are a means, not the source. Allah is the source. And when you shift your reliance to the source, your anxiety decreases. You stop over-explaining yourself. You stop chasing validation. You stop trying to force people to see your worth, because you know Allah sees it. That realization changes how you move. You become quieter, more composed, more focused on pleasing Allah than pleasing people. Before this hardship, maybe your biggest fear was losing someone's approval. Now your biggest focus is not losing Allah's closeness. That is elevation. Allah sometimes removes people from your life not because they are bad, but because your heart was too attached. And attachment without balance leads to suffering. He teaches you that no human being can carry the weight that only he was meant to carry in your life. When you place ultimate trust in people, you will always feel unstable. When you place ultimate trust in Allah, you find grounding, and now you feel that grounding. You do not panic the way you used to when someone's behavior changes. You do not collapse when someone distances themselves. You no longer interpret every silence as rejection, because your emotional survival is no longer in their hands. It is in Allah's. That is not weakness. That is liberation. When you reach this stage, when your heart says, Allah is enough for me, something shifts spiritually, because Allah does not ignore a servant who turns to Him sincerely. He does not leave a heart hanging after it detaches from unhealthy reliance. He replaces what you let go of. He fills what was emptied. He strengthens what was exposed, but He does it in His timing, not yours. And now, instead of chasing people for answers, you are chasing closeness to Allah. Instead of trying to fix everything externally, you are fixing your internal state. Instead of obsessing over who left, you are focusing on who remains, and Allah remains. If you look at yourself honestly, you will see this transformation clearly. You are less reactive, less needy, less desperate for reassurance, more patient, more composed, more centered. And that change is not random. It is the result of being pushed toward the only constant that never fails. When your heart stops clinging to creation and starts clinging to the Creator, you are being prepared for elevation, because Allah does not raise hearts that are overly attached to what is temporary. He raises hearts that are anchored in Him. So if you have stopped begging people for what only Allah can give, if you have stopped chasing those who walked away, if you have stopped placing your worth in someone else's hands, then understand something powerful. You are not losing, you are being upgraded. And when your reliance shifts correctly, your direction shifts naturally. Because once Allah becomes enough for you, everything else falls into its proper place. The doors are not bursting open, they are aligning quietly. At the beginning of your hardship, you imagined that relief would be dramatic. You thought one day everything would suddenly change. A big opportunity, a massive breakthrough, an instant solution. You expected noise. You expected fireworks. You expected something so obvious that you would say, this is it. This is the moment everything turned around. But that is not how Allah always works. Most of the time, when Allah closes a difficult chapter, He does it quietly. So quietly that if you are not paying attention, you might miss the signs. Look carefully at your life right now. Maybe nothing explosive has happened, but small things have shifted. Conversations feel different. Certain tensions are no longer as intense. Opportunities you were not chasing are slowly appearing. People who once felt central to your world are fading naturally without drama. And new people, new thoughts, new ideas are entering your space. It is subtle, but it is real. You expected a loud door to swing open. Instead, Allah is rearranging the hallway. You see, when Allah prepares relief, He does not always drop it into your lap in one moment. He aligns circumstances first. He adjusts timing. He moves hearts. He removes obstacles quietly. He places pieces into position. And while you are looking for a miracle, He is building one behind the scenes. The problem is this: you are trained to notice loud changes. You are not trained to notice alignment. But alignment is more powerful than sudden explosion. Sudden changes can feel exciting, but alignment creates stability. When doors burst open too quickly, you may not be ready for what is behind them. When doors align slowly, you are being positioned properly. Think about the last few weeks or months. Certain things that once felt stuck are now slightly moving. Not fully resolved, but shifting. Maybe you have more clarity than before. Maybe you feel guided toward a different direction. Maybe something you once desperately wanted no longer feels right. That is alignment. Allah is adjusting your desires to match what is better for you. You may have prayed for something specific, but Allah may be preparing something different, something healthier, something more stable, something more aligned with your growth. And instead of forcing you into it, He gently moves you toward it. You may not even realize how many small redirections have happened. A delayed meeting, a cancelled plan, a message that was never sent, an opportunity that closed only for another one to appear quietly. None of it dramatic, but none of it random. Allah does not move randomly. Every delay, every removal, every new connection, every fading attachment, it is all part of alignment. Sometimes relief does not look like getting what you wanted. It looks like being redirected toward what you actually need. And here is something powerful. You are calmer now, which means you can see these alignments more clearly. In the early stage of hardship, you were too emotional to notice subtle changes. You were too anxious to recognize gradual shifts. But now that your heart is steadier, you can observe differently. You are less desperate, less rushed, less attached to forcing outcomes. And that calm allows you to recognize divine arrangement. You may not have the full solution yet, but you can feel movement. You can sense that things are not as stuck as they once were. You can see that some doors that were tightly closed no longer matter to you. And some doors you never considered are beginning to open slightly. That is not coincidence. That is positioning. Allah is positioning you for your next chapter. And positioning takes precision. It takes timing. It takes patience. Imagine if relief came too early. Would you have appreciated it? Would you have handled it correctly? Would you have been mature enough to protect it? Maybe not. So Allah waited until your heart stabilized, until your reliance shifted, until your growth became visible. And now He is aligning the external world with the internal transformation that already happened inside you. You changed first. Now your surroundings are adjusting. That is the pattern. Inner stability first, outer alignment second. You might not see a giant breakthrough yet, but look for patterns. Look for how certain conflicts are losing intensity. Look for how certain distractions are fading. Look for how your priorities are becoming clearer. Look for how you feel less attached to what once consumed you. That is alignment. Relief does not always scream. Sometimes it whispers. It whispers through subtle peace, through gradual openings, through unexpected ease in areas that once felt heavy. And here is something important. When Allah aligns doors instead of bursting them open, it means the change is sustainable. Sudden excitement fades quickly. Carefully arranged transitions last longer. Allah is not interested in temporary relief. He is interested in stable elevation. If your life is being rearranged quietly, trust that it is intentional. If certain people are drifting without conflict, trust that it is protection. If new paths are appearing slowly, trust that it is preparation. Do not rush the alignment. Do not force the door. Do not mistake silence for stagnation. Sometimes silence is construction. Sometimes delay is design. Sometimes nothing dramatic happening is actually the biggest sign that something significant is being built. You asked Allah to close a painful chapter, but chapters do not slam shut. They turn gradually, page by page. And right now, the pages are turning. Not loudly, but intentionally. So look carefully. The doors may not be bursting open, but they are aligning. And when everything aligns at the right moment, the transition will feel natural. Not forced, not chaotic, just right. And that is how you know Allah is the one opening it. You feel a strange peace you cannot fully explain. It is not excitement. It is not celebration. It is not even relief in the way you imagined it would feel. It is something quieter, steadier. You wake up and the problem is still there, but your chest does not feel as tight. You think about the situation and instead of spiraling, your mind settles. You speak about it and your voice does not tremble the way it used to. There is a calmness inside you that feels unfamiliar. And part of you wonders, why am I not panicking anymore? That peace is not random. It is sakina. When Allah prepares to close a difficult chapter, He often sends peace before He sends solutions. Because peace is a sign that your heart has aligned with His decree. In the beginning you were tense. You were trying to force outcomes. You were mentally fighting reality. You were saying this has to change now. And that internal resistance exhausted you. But now, You are no longer fighting what is written. You are walking with it. You still make dua. You still hope. You still want relief. But there is no desperation in your tone anymore. There is trust. That trust creates stability, and stability creates peace. You may not even have noticed when it happened. It did not arrive with an announcement. It came slowly. One night you slept a little better. One day you reacted more calmly. One moment you chose silence instead of over-explaining, and gradually the anxiety loosened its grip. Now, instead of obsessing over what if, you say, whatever Allah wills, and you mean it. That is not giving up. That is surrender in its most powerful form. Surrender is not weakness. It is recognizing that you are not meant to carry the universe on your shoulders. You were never in control of every outcome. You were only responsible for your effort and your sincerity. And once you accepted that, your heart exhaled. You stopped trying to predict every possible scenario. You stopped imagining the worst case every time something felt uncertain. You stopped interpreting silence as rejection and delay as disaster. You began to say, if it is meant for me, it will reach me. That sentence alone removes half of anxiety. Because if what is written cannot miss you, then why panic? And if what is not written cannot reach you, then why chase? This peace you feel now is a sign of spiritual growth. Before this hardship, maybe your iman was present, but it was comfortable. Now it is tested, and tested iman becomes deeper. When you are calm in the middle of uncertainty, it means your trust is no longer theoretical. It is lived. Anyone can say, I trust Allah when life is stable. But to say it while waiting, while uncertain, while outcomes are still hidden, that is real tawakkul. And Allah loves that state in a believer. He loves when you rely on Him without seeing the full picture. He loves when you remain patient without knowing the timeline. He loves when your heart is steady, even when the storm has not fully cleared. That peace is a reward. Not for the problem ending, but for you enduring it correctly. You are no longer desperate for immediate answers. You are no longer begging for closure from people. You are no longer chasing reassurance constantly. You are grounded. That grounding is powerful because desperation creates chaos. Peace creates clarity, and clarity allows you to move wisely. Notice how your decisions feel different now. You are less impulsive, less emotional, less reactive. You think long term. You consider consequences. You prioritize your relationship with Allah over temporary comfort. That is growth. And growth attracts stability. Sometimes Allah delays visible relief because He wants to give you something greater than what you asked for. He wants to give you internal strength. And once that strength settles in your heart, He aligns the external world with it. You are in that in-between stage. The storm is not fully gone, but the fear of the storm is, and that is significant, because when fear leaves, space is created. Space for hope, space for clarity, space for new direction. You feel guided now, even if you cannot explain how. You sense that you are being led somewhere. You may not know the exact destination, but you trust the direction. That trust reduces anxiety. You no longer need to know every detail of the future. You only need to know that Allah is managing it, and that is enough. This kind of peace does not come from circumstances. It comes from surrender. It comes from realizing that Allah's plan is wiser than your preferences. It comes from accepting that sometimes what hurts you is also what shapes you. It comes from understanding that delays are not denials. And when that understanding settles deep inside you, panic loses its power. You are not numb. You are not indifferent. You still care deeply, but you are not controlled by fear anymore. And that is strength. When sakina enters your heart, it means something inside you has aligned with Allah's wisdom. And when alignment happens internally, external change is usually not far behind. Allah does not place peace in a heart randomly. He places it when the heart has passed through the fire and come out refined. If you can sit in uncertainty without collapsing, if you can wait without losing faith, if you can say Alhamdulillah even before the outcome changes, then understand something powerful. You are not at the beginning of your storm anymore. You are nearing the transition, because peace is often the final sign before the chapter turns. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady. And when Allah replaces panic with peace, it is rarely without purpose. This peace you feel now is not accidental. It did not come because the problem is small. It came because your heart is no longer small. At the beginning of this hardship, your emotions were louder than your faith. Every delay felt like danger. Every silence felt like rejection. Every uncertainty felt like loss. You were constantly bracing yourself for impact. But now something inside you has expanded. The same uncertainty exists, yet you are not reacting the same way. The same waiting continues, yet you are not suffocating in it. That is not coincidence. That is capacity. Allah increased your emotional capacity. He stretched your patience. He strengthened your tolerance for the unknown. And when capacity increases, panic decreases. You are no longer fragile in the face of uncertainty. You are steady. Before this trial, you may have thought you were strong, but you had never truly been tested at this level. Now you have been tested, and you did not collapse. You bent, you cried, you struggled. But you did not abandon Allah. You did not walk away from your prayers. You did not give up completely. And that endurance built something inside you that comfort never could. This peace you feel is the result of surviving internal battles. It is the result of nights when you wanted to break but chose to pray. It is the result of moments when you wanted to react but chose restraint. It is the result of tears that no one saw except Allah. That kind of peace is earned through surrender. You are no longer arguing with reality. You are cooperating with it. You are no longer saying, "Why is this happening?" You are saying, "What does Allah want me to learn here?" And when your mindset shifts from resistance to reflection, your stress reduces. You realize that fighting qadr only exhausts you. Accepting qadr strengthens you. Acceptance does not mean liking the pain. It means trusting the wisdom behind it. And once trust settles in your chest, fear loses its grip. You used to wake up with heaviness. Now you wake up with awareness. You used to replay worst case scenarios. Now you say, "Whatever is written will reach me." You used to fear losing what you valued. Now you understand that nothing truly meant for you can be taken away. That understanding creates peace. It is not emotional numbness. It is spiritual grounding. And grounding changes how you walk through life. You move slower, more intentionally. You speak less out of impulse. You observe more. You think before responding. You are no longer desperate for immediate resolution. You are patient for correct resolution. There is a difference. Immediate relief may feel good for a moment. Correct relief builds stability. Allah does not rush your breakthrough. He prepares you for it. And the peace you feel now is preparation. Because when your heart is calm, you make better decisions. When your heart is calm, you recognize opportunities. When your heart is calm, you do not sabotage blessings with fear. Imagine if relief came when you were still anxious. You would question it, doubt it, overanalyze it, maybe even ruin it with insecurity. But now, you are steady enough to receive what is coming. That steadiness is a sign. It means you are no longer surviving the storm. You are mastering yourself within it. And once self-mastery is achieved, the external storm loses its power. You may not know exactly what Allah is preparing, but you feel something shifting, not in noise, in depth. You feel more connected in your salah, more sincere in your dua, more aware of your reactions, more detached from unnecessary drama. That is elevation. You are no longer reacting to every emotional wave. You are observing them, and observation creates control. Not control over outcomes, but control over yourself. That is the greatest victory, because the real test was never just the situation. It was your response to it, and your response has matured. You no longer crumble when someone disappoints you. You no longer spiral when plans shift. You no longer interpret delay as abandonment. You trust that Allah is working, even in silence. That trust produces peace, and peace is often the final internal signal before external change. You are in a transition. The storm is not fully gone, but it is no longer terrifying. And that means its power over you has weakened. Allah does not place sakina in your heart randomly. He places it when you have reached a level of submission that qualifies you for it. If you can wait without losing hope, if you can remain grateful while still praying for change, if you can stay obedient even while uncertain, then your season is shifting. Not because you forced it, but because you matured through it. And maturity is what unlocks the next level. This peace is not the end. It is the signal that your heart is ready for relief, ready for elevation, ready for whatever Allah writes next. Because when panic is replaced with peace, it usually means the page is about to turn. There is something even deeper about this peace you are feeling. It is not just calmness. It is detachment from fear. Before this trial, fear used to control your imagination. You would imagine losing everything. You would imagine being abandoned. You would imagine failure before it even happened. Your mind would create scenarios that never came true, yet your body would react as if they already had. That was exhausting. Now, your imagination is quieter. You no longer feed worst case scenarios. You no longer build emotional reactions around events that have not happened. You are living in the present more than before. And that is growth. Because anxiety lives in the future. Regret lives in the past. Peace lives in the present. And Allah trains you through hardship to return to the present moment where tawakkul exists. You are not trying to predict every detail anymore. You are not demanding to see the full picture. You are okay with not knowing. That is huge. In the beginning, not knowing terrified you. Now, not knowing humbles you. You have accepted that your knowledge is limited and that Allah's knowledge is complete. That acceptance creates surrender, and surrender creates stability. You are no longer trying to control timelines. You are no longer asking, when will this end? Instead, you are asking, how should I behave while this continues? That question changes everything, because once your focus shifts to your character instead of your circumstances, you gain power. You cannot control outcomes, but you can control your response. And now your response is calmer, measured, faith-driven. You may still feel moments of doubt. You may still have waves of emotion, but they do not dominate you. They visit. They do not live inside you permanently. That is strength. Before, your emotions owned you. Now, you observe them. You recognize when fear tries to return, but instead of feeding it, you redirect it. You make wudu. You pray 2 rakah. You sit in silence. You remind yourself that Allah is Al-Hakim, the most wise. That is spiritual discipline. And discipline brings peace. The peace you feel now is not dependent on everything going perfectly. It is rooted in knowing that even if things do not go the way you imagined, you will survive. You will adjust. You will trust. You will continue. That confidence was not there before. Before, you thought losing certain things would destroy you. Now you know it would hurt but not destroy you, because Allah carried you through this. And if He carried you through this, He can carry you through what comes next. You have evidence now. Evidence that you are more resilient than you thought. Evidence that your heart can endure more than you imagined. Evidence that Allah's support is real. And that evidence strengthens your iman. Peace comes when fear is replaced with certainty. Not certainty about outcomes, but certainty about Allah. You are certain that He sees you, certain that He hears you, certain that He is not wasting your tears, certain that He is not delaying without wisdom. And once that certainty anchors itself inside you, anxiety loses its authority. You are no longer rushing toward relief. You are walking steadily toward it. You are not chasing doors. You are preparing yourself for whichever door opens. And preparation is a sign of readiness. Maybe this peace is Allah's way of telling you, you are ready now, ready to receive, ready to move forward, ready to step into a new chapter without carrying the chaos of the old one. Because if you entered the next season with the same panic you had before, you would sabotage it. But now, you are steady enough to protect what is coming. You are grounded enough to appreciate it. You are mature enough to handle it. This is not the beginning of your storm. It is the final stretch. Peace does not arrive at the beginning of hardship. It arrives near the end. When the heart has learned what it needed to learn, when the ego has softened, when reliance has shifted, when fear has weakened, when trust has strengthened, you are in that stage. You can feel it. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer trembling inside. And when trembling stops, transition begins. So if you feel this quiet steadiness in your chest, if you feel less desperate, less reactive, less afraid, do not ignore it. It is not random. It is a sign that Allah has refined your heart enough for what is next. Because when peace settles deeply, it usually means the chapter is about to turn. This season is ending not because time passed, but because you changed. Many people think hardship ends when Allah feels sorry for them. That is not how it works. Hardship ends when it finishes its assignment. And the assignment was never just about your situation. It was about your transformation. Look at yourself honestly. You are calmer now, stronger now, more aware now, less attached now, more connected to Allah now. That did not happen by accident. At the beginning of this trial, you wanted escape. You wanted quick relief. You wanted the door to reopen exactly the way it was. But now, even if the door reopened exactly the same way, you would not walk through it the same way. Because you are not the same person. That is completion. Allah does not remove a test simply because you are tired of it. He removes it when it has shaped you. When your reaction changes, when your heart stabilizes, when your dependence shifts, when your perspective matures, when you no longer need the lesson to continue in order to grow. In the early days of this hardship, you were reactive. You were emotionally shaken. You were seeking validation. You were trying to control outcomes. Now you are steady. You pause before speaking. You think before reacting. You pray before deciding. You trust before assuming. That internal shift is the evidence that the lesson has entered your character. And once a lesson enters your character, the external test begins to fade. Think about this deeply. If Allah kept you in the same storm after you had already transformed, it would serve no purpose. Allah is Al-Hakim, the most wise. He does not extend suffering without wisdom. If the wisdom has been absorbed, the suffering does not need to continue at the same intensity. Maybe the storm is already weakening. Maybe the pressure is already lighter. Maybe the emotional weight is already less. Even if the full breakthrough has not yet arrived, the intensity has changed. That is not random. That is transition. You are no longer fighting the test. You are walking through it. And that difference changes everything. When you stop resisting what Allah has written, the struggle softens. When you stop demanding specific outcomes and start asking for what is best, doors begin aligning. When you detach from what once controlled you, you become ready for something higher. Elevation requires detachment. You cannot rise while clinging to what is meant to stay below you. This season detached you from certain people, certain expectations, certain illusions, certain versions of yourself. And detachment creates space. Space for new direction, space for healthier connections, space for better opportunities, space for growth you could not access before. If you are honest, some things you once begged for no longer excite you. Some doors you once cried over no longer feel necessary. Some relationships you once chased no longer feel aligned. That is growth. And growth is the signal that the chapter has served its purpose. Allah was not punishing you. He was upgrading you. But upgrades require removal first. Old software must be cleared. Old attachments must be broken. Old habits must be exposed. And that process feels uncomfortable. But now that it has happened, you are lighter, more focused, more grounded, more aligned with what truly matters. You value peace more than validation. You value obedience more than attention. You value clarity more than comfort. That shift is everything, because the next chapter of your life requires this version of you, not the old one. If Allah gave you what is coming next while you were still emotionally unstable, you might have misused it. If He elevated you while you were still overly attached to people, you might have compromised it. If He opened new doors while your heart was still chaotic, you might have sabotaged them. So He refined you first. Now you are ready. Not perfect, but prepared. Prepared to handle blessings without arrogance. Prepared to handle responsibility without panic. Prepared to handle opportunity without desperation. And when readiness meets divine timing, transition happens. Do not underestimate this stage. This quiet, steady phase is not stagnation. It is positioning. You are positioned differently now. You think differently. You move differently. You choose differently. And that means your future will unfold differently. The test is not ending because you forced it to. It is ending because you outgrew it. You no longer need the same level of pressure to learn the lesson. You no longer need the same intensity to detach. You no longer need the same storm to grow. And Allah does not keep you in a class you have already passed. If your heart is stable, if your reliance is correct, if your perspective is clear, then understand something powerful. This chapter is closing, not dramatically, not loudly, but intentionally. And when Allah closes a chapter, He does not leave the page empty. He turns it towards something better. Not necessarily easier, but better, more aligned, more mature, more stable. You survived this season, but more than that, you evolved through it. And evolution is the clearest sign that transition is near, because once the lesson is complete, the season has no reason to remain. There is something even deeper you must understand. This chapter is not closing because you are exhausted. It is closing because you are equipped. At the beginning of this trial, you were asking for escape. Now you are prepared for responsibility. That is a completely different level. Before, you wanted relief just to feel comfortable again. Now you want relief so you can move forward correctly. Your mindset has shifted from save me to shape me. And Allah responds differently to those two mindsets. When you only want escape, you are still focused on pain. When you accept shaping, you are focused on growth. Growth unlocks elevation. You may not even recognize how disciplined you have become. You control your reactions more. You guard your tongue more. You protect your energy more. You are careful about who you allow close. You are careful about what you allow to disturb your peace. That awareness was built inside the storm, and storms do not last forever once they have built what they came to build. You used to be emotionally dependent on certain outcomes. Now you are emotionally anchored in Allah. That anchor changes everything, because when your anchor is strong, waves do not scare you the same way. The waves may still come, but they no longer feel fatal. That is readiness. You are no longer fragile. You are no longer chasing closure from people who cannot give it. You are no longer seeking explanations from those who do not understand you. You have accepted that some answers belong to Allah alone. That acceptance creates maturity, and maturity prepares you for the next level. Here is something powerful. Sometimes Allah does not remove a hardship immediately because He is aligning something greater behind it. He waits until your character matches the blessing that is coming. Blessings without character can destroy a person. Elevation without humility can corrupt a heart. Opportunity without discipline can be wasted. So Allah refines first, then He releases. If you feel steadier now, if you feel wiser now, if you feel less attached to what once defined you, then the refining is almost complete. The stage feels quiet, almost neutral. You are not overly excited. You are not overly distressed. You are balanced. Balance is strength, because extremes are unstable. Now you can handle success without arrogance. You can handle delay without despair. You can handle loss without collapse. That emotional balance is the sign of completion. You are not the same person who entered the storm. And because you are not the same person, the next chapter cannot look the same either. You are prepared to walk into something new without carrying old desperation. You are prepared to receive without clinging. You are prepared to lead your own life with clarity instead of confusion. That is why this chapter is closing. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are positioned for growth that no longer requires pain as a teacher. Positioned for doors that require patience, not panic. Positioned for a future that matches the strength you built. Do not fear this transition. Do not doubt it. Do not overanalyze it. You asked Allah for relief, but what He gave you first was resilience. You asked for clarity, but what He gave you first was character. You asked for ease, but what He gave you first was endurance. And now you are strong enough to carry ease without losing depth. You are ready to receive without forgetting what the season taught you. And when a believer reaches that point when they can say, Ya Allah, whatever you write, I trust you, that is when the page turns. Quietly, deliberately, without chaos. The lesson is complete. The refinement is complete. And when refinement is complete, elevation follows. Now understand this clearly. You are not just exiting a storm. You are stepping into a different version of your life. And the reason this chapter is closing is not because the difficulty ran out of strength. It is because you stopped being the person it was sent to shape. At the beginning of this season, you needed the pressure. You needed the shaking. You needed the discomfort, because there were parts of you that would not have changed without it. There were attachments that would not have broken. There were habits that would not have been exposed. There were weaknesses that would have stayed hidden. So Allah allowed the storm, not to harm you, but to refine you. And now, the refinement has done its work. You think differently. You respond differently. You value different things. You no longer measure your worth by who stays or who leaves. You no longer measure success by immediate outcomes. You measure your state by your connection with Allah. That is elevation. Before, you were asking Allah to fix your situation. Now you are asking Him to keep your heart firm. That change alone tells you how far you have come. Because a stable heart can survive unstable circumstances. But unstable hearts collapse even in comfort. You are not unstable anymore. You are grounded. You are not easily triggered. You are not easily shaken. You are not chasing validation the way you once did. You are not afraid of losing what was never meant to stay. That fear has weakened. And when fear weakens, faith strengthens. This is how you know the season is closing. The storm no longer feels like punishment. It feels like preparation. It no longer feels like chaos. It feels like training. You can now look back and see how every painful moment forced growth, how every delay created discipline, how every disappointment built resilience. And here is something important. When you can thank Allah for the hardship, not because it was easy, but because it made you stronger, that is completion. That is graduation. You are no longer bitter. You are better. There is no anger dominating your chest. There is no resentment controlling your thoughts. There is acceptance. And acceptance unlocks movement. Because when you accept what happened, you free yourself from being stuck in it. You are no longer emotionally living in the past. You are mentally prepared for the future. That is transition. Allah does not elevate someone who is still mentally trapped in what broke them. He elevates those who learned from what broke them. And you have learned. You learned patience. You learned silence. You learned discernment. You learned how to detach without hatred. You learned how to forgive without forgetting the lesson. You learned how to rely on Allah in a way you never had to before. And that level of reliance qualifies you for something new. You may not know exactly what is coming, but you are not afraid of it the way you once would have been. Because this season proved something to you. You can survive, you can endure, you can adapt, you can grow. And most importantly, Allah carries you. That knowledge is unshakable now. So when the next chapter begins, you will not enter it desperate. You will enter it disciplined. You will not enter it fearful. You will enter it focused. You will not enter it dependent on people. You will enter it anchored in Allah. That is why this chapter is closing. Not because you demanded it to, but because you matured through it. And maturity changes destiny. When a servant evolves, Allah aligns their path differently. When a heart stabilizes, Allah opens doors that require stability. When faith deepens, elevation follows. This ending is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is quiet, but it is powerful. The shaking has stopped. The desperation has faded. The lessons have settled. And when the lessons settle, the page turns. You are not who you were when this started. And because you are not the same, your life cannot remain the same either. The season is ending, not because time passed, but because you are ready.